Hello, this is Dr. B. I appreciate you stopping by. We thought it might be helpful if we provide an audio series based on the book Speak Softly, Love Loudly, Uncommon Sense for Raising Healthy and Successful Kids. So, stand by. Let's get to it.
Chapter 4. Battle Plan for Discipline. Getting Organized. You know you've lost control when you're the one who goes to your room. Baba Bel Hajusewicz. A photographer from a nationally renowned magazine was given the assignment of taking photos of a large forest fire. However, the smoke of the fire was so thick that he couldn't get any clear shots. He frantically called his home office to have them hire an airplane. His editor assured him that the aircraft would be waiting for him at the airport. He gathered up his gear and headed off to meet the plane. When he arrived at the small rural airport, sure enough, there was a plane warming up near the runway. He threw his equipment through the doorway, climbed in, and yelled, "Let's go! Let's go!" The young pilot swung the nose of the aircraft into the wind, and they soon were in the air. The plane was paralleling the smoke. "Fly over the north side of the inferno," the photographer instructed. "I want you to make 3 or 4 low-level passes." "Why?" asked the pilot. "Because I'm going to take pictures. I'm a photographer. Photographers take pictures," he answered sarcastically. "Why do you think we're up here?" he continued impatiently. After a long pause, the pilot turned to him, looking somewhat green, and said, "So, you mean you're not the flight instructor?" There is no substitute for good planning. People prepare for job interviews, vacations, and going into battle. Disciplining children can often feel like war, so the first step towards effective discipline is to have a battle plan. To start with, behavioral expectations need to be clear. Standards for attitudes and behaviors should be spelled out for children. The clearer the rules and expectations, the easier it is to meet them and for parents to correct them. However, requirements not only need to be clear, but also fair and achievable. We should not set standards for a child that they cannot live up to. A 3-year-old shouldn't be expected to carry a bucket of water without spilling most of it. Be aware of what you expect from your child. Then determine, is this reasonable? Is this achievable? Once standards are identified and found reasonable, they must be communicated clearly, not only to the child but to the entire family. Everyone in the family needs to be on the same page, reading the same book, and knowing how the story ends. There is no substitute for sitting down and talking with your child. Have a family meeting to go through what is expected of them, such as rules, behavior, chores. The reasons behind the rules should also be explained. Details need to be given, but the amounts should be dependent upon the age of the child. Older children need and can understand more detail. Younger children should just get the bare bones. However, this does not imply that parents should expect their children to willfully understand the reasoning, or even agree with it. But some information does sink in, and taking the time to explain shows that we care. Over time, the reasons behind discipline, standards, or expectations will become clearer to a child. Maturity eventually shows itself and does have benefits. This fact is more clearly seen as we practice the art of consistency. Consistency. When a child realizes that they can get away with it some of the time, they will gamble that they can get away with it most of the time. A long-accepted principle of reinforcement in the psychological literature refers to this as the phenomena of the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. Behaviors that are reinforced or supported encourage a repeat of the same actions later. How this translates for parents is that if behavior is rewarded from time to time unpredictably, the chance of that behavior resurfacing actually increases. In other words, if we want our children to do the wrong thing more often, all we have to do is look the other way now and again. Giving consequences for inappropriate behavior inconsistently can have the same long-term effects as giving no consequences at all. Consistency involves responding over and over again to similar situations in the same way. What is expected of a child and the consequences that will be required for unacceptable behavior becomes clear to them through consistency. This commitment translates into giving consequences that are known, predictable, and sufficient. Children learn to make the right choices by learning to first avoid unpleasant consequences. Similar situations should always be managed with similar rewards or negative consequences. When parents are inconsistent, they encourage manipulation, lies, deceit, and avoidance of responsibility on the part of their children. Our goal is not to teach children to manipulate or avoid what they need to do. The aim is to face the consequences of their actions and to take personal responsibility. Poor choices reap painful consequences. Healthy choices may be difficult in the short run, but protect them from bigger problems with much harsher consequences in the long run. Good choices bring about rewards. Unfortunately for children, the world isn't as forgiving as most of their families tend to be. Society can be brutal in response to unacceptable behavior. Healthy choices now protect a child later. A pattern of good choices grows from the seeds of consistency. However, consistency isn't the only factor necessary. While consistency is extremely important, so is timing. Timing. Consequences should be given swiftly, with little discussion, and as close to the time of the offense as possible. It should be made clear that the consequences are a direct result of the child's actions or inactions. By keeping the cost for the behavior close in time to the offense, the correction is directly attached to the inappropriate behavior. In other words, they hold hands, one pulling the other along with it. This attachment reminds a child that the misbehavior isn't worth the price they must pay for it. So parents need to act quickly. The more time that passes between the offense and the consequence, the less these two factors are going to be linked together in the mind of a child. The weaker this link, the less likely they are to learn from their experience and then avoid the inappropriate behavior and its consequences in the future. One action must be seen as resulting in the other. Their avoidance of misbehavior in the future is motivated by not wanting to pay the price attached to their bad choices. However, there is an exception to giving consequences swiftly. It is hoped that the need to postpone providing correction will be rare. But there will be times when consequences must be delayed due to the likelihood of a parent acting out their own anger and frustration. Every parent will eventually face a situation when, out of frustration or fatigue, they will begin to lose their temper. Parents in this state are not able to be matter-of-fact in their approach and end up teaching lessons that they dare not teach. The wiser approach is to wait and cool off. Later, return to the matter of concern and address the issues with the child. A good rule of thumb when disciplining is that if we are going to act in anger, or if there's a good chance of us getting out of control, we need to postpone our actions until a later time. But this word, postpone, is important to define. It doesn't mean to avoid or drop the matter and never come back to it. After things have settled down, most notably the parent, there is a need to go back to the child and deal with the problem. Another circumstance, aside from anger, may arise that makes it appropriate to delay discipline. There will be times when it is necessary to consult the other parent before taking action. This need can cause some delays. However, a decision to delay must be weighed against whether more will be lost by delaying or pushing forward. When too much will be lost by delaying, take immediate action. All parents should be prepared to deal with most situations their children get into or create. But there are times when matters are too complicated and confusing, so mother and father need to talk. This applies whether there has been a divorce or not. When a delay is necessary, a child should be told there will be consequences for their actions. However, mom and dad have to confer in order to determine what the price will be. However, parents should not use this as a license for using the typical, "you just wait until your father gets home," or "wait until I tell your mother." Both moms and dads need to be prepared to act on their own when discipline is needed. An unnecessary delay of discipline not only weakens the connection between behavior and consequences, but also could be seen by a child as cruel and unusual punishment. The delay can be used to increase a child's anxiety by having to wait. For some children, the price is too high because they will be eaten up with worry. This approach also tends to make the other parent the heavy. Ironically, they were not even present when the rules were broken. When a pattern develops where one parent has to repeatedly be the bad guy, the overall relationship between that parent and their child becomes darkly colored. A related issue is that often the heavy parent is actually reacting to the other parent's emotions and not the child's actual behavior. It is unfair for one parent to repeatedly put the other parent in such a negative position. Too often a parent can put the other in this position out of laziness or selfishness. A result can be one parent resenting the other or their child. However, working together avoids many problems and presents numerous choices for discipline. Disciplined choices. Don't use a sledgehammer to kill a flea. Discipline should be used in the same manner that medicine is measured out. Use the minimum dose that will effect a cure. With discipline, use the lightest approach that will create the desired change. For example, spanking a child for spilling a glass of tea would be unwarranted. Having them clean up the spill would be logical. When it comes to correcting children, parents need to use the smallest amount of force or consequence to achieve the desired result. If a child does not respond to the minimum amount of discipline or a particular type of discipline, then parents can always up the ante by increasing the consequences. This approach involves recognizing that the first step was ineffective. Therefore, a parent takes a step up the ladder of discipline and uses the next level of consequence. Escalating discipline will be explained in more detail shortly. Another area that should affect our choice of discipline is the fact that different forms of correction will motivate different children. One child might respond to being made to stay inside because of a love of being outdoors and being with friends. Another child might be more naturally reclusive, and keeping them inside would actually reward bad behavior. Making them go outside would be a more appropriate consequence for them. Choosing the right form of discipline can be a tricky business. We need to recognize what motivates our children and then use that knowledge as leverage to prompt them to make the right choices. This approach involves paying attention to how children spend their time, who they like to be with, and what they like to do. It also includes what they dislike and how they spend their money. Understanding what motivates children is key to effective discipline. There is no such thing as change without motivation. Motivation occurs by pushing the right buttons. Parents can motivate their children to do what's right by giving appropriate correction and, when needed, escalating consequences. Escalating consequences. Like steps of a ladder, consequences can begin at the lowest level thought to motivate change. This approach creates the least amount of discomfort necessary. What is hoped for with this strategy is that the milder consequence will result in the desired effect. However, sometimes the minimal amount does not take. When this occurs, a higher-priced consequence is in order. For example, if a child was being loud or somewhat of a pest, the first level of discipline would be to warn them, point out their behavior, and tell them to stop. However, if the behavior continues, then parents need to go up a rung on the ladder. In this example, a child could be given a timeout. If they don't respond to timeout, their timeout can be extended or started over. The level of consequence is taken up another notch. If they don't respond to that consequence, they can be sent to their room. When this intervention doesn't have enough impact, even more severe consequences can be added, such as restriction and grounding. Heavier consequences can continue to be given as they are needed. The ladder of escalating consequences can involve 5 or 6 rungs. These range from ignoring a child to the most severe consequence involving physical intervention. The 6th possible rung is the controversial consequence of spanking, and its use is dependent on a parent's level of comfort with it. Rungs on the ladder include ignoring, warning, removal, paying a price, losses, and possibly spanking. A diagram outlining offenses and this escalating system will be presented later, so please be patient, for patience has its place in discipline. Patience. Discipline not only involves a battle of wills, but also a battle of wisdom. One of the most common tactics that a child will use with a parent is to say or imply that the consequence they received had no effect. "I don't care. It doesn't bother me. That didn't hurt," are not uncommon dribblings from children's mouths. These utterances can be in response to having toys taken up, privileges being taken away, or even spanking. This bluffing strategy in response to our discipline does not end once children become teenagers. In fact, a teenager is likely to use this tactic even more. The logic on the part of a child is that if they can convince the parent that the discipline is ineffective, the parent will give up and stop that form of discipline. Another common motivation for a child is pride. They do not want the parent to know that they are having an effect and exerting power over them. A child wants to be in control. Therefore, there is a tremendous payoff for the child who gets their parent to give up on any particular consequence. Sometimes a parent will give up on trying other consequences as well. A child avoids discomfort, and they get to be in control. Children use these tactics for confusing us and avoiding consequences. Therefore, parents need a calculated approach to such responses. One method of dealing with statements like, "I don't care," about the consequences, is to add additional consequences to what has already been given. As parents, we can respond to our children's comments with, "I must not be doing it right then. So we're not only going to have this consequence, but we're going to add this to it." Increasing the consequences calls the bluff by increasing the stakes. At this point, assuming the initial discipline was having more of an effect than the child was letting on, a child will usually become quieter and won't push the matter much further. However, even if this doesn't occur, don't assume you're not having an impact. Follow through anyway. The dilemma that most parents deal with is that they are not only involved with their child in disciplining them, but they are also juggling a job, other children, adult relationships, their marriage, and keeping the house running. The list of energy-draining responsibilities can be endless. Usually, a parent wants and needs to deal with a problem as quickly as possible and then move on. A child, on the other hand, can zoom in and focus on that one issue of avoiding consequences or being in control. They don't have all those other balls to keep in the air. Because the parent has many other things to deal with, they are often tired and distracted. For a parent, disciplining their child is often just one more thing to deal with in their busy day. For a child, avoidance of consequences is all they have to deal with at the moment. This fact puts parents at a disadvantage. Due to this reality, parents need to focus and take action in spite of how they might be feeling at any given moment. Another trap that our children can set for us occurs when we try some new disciplining tactic. Children will often do the opposite of what we are hoping for. They will actually increase the old misbehavior rather than show new appropriate behavior. Attempting to be more consistent or trying new forms of discipline often prompts what parents don't want to see. A child will push and test. They're testing to see if this new effort is for real. Parents need to follow through. It is important for children to see that parents aren't going to waver. Discipline teaches our children the way they should behave. The parent's usual expectation when trying a new tactic is that this new intervention, once applied, will cause an immediate decrease in the unwanted behavior. However, this is rarely the way it works. Normally, a child is going to test us and test what is new. They want to see if we really mean what we say. Children want to know if we will follow through, so when tightening things up, what we should expect is more undesirable behavior at first. If parents can go into a new situation expecting an increase in the unwanted behavior as opposed to a decrease, they are more likely to give the new strategy time to work. Too often, new approaches are given up on before they have really been given a chance. The time new approaches take tends to frustrate a lot of parents, and so they give up before the new rules or consequences have an opportunity to put down roots. In other words, our children outlast us. They are more patient than we are. They resist the change long enough for us to give up. Children have fewer matters to distract them and often know that if they can pressure us long enough, we'll tire and not follow through. Giving up sends a very bad message to a child and gives them too much control. This is power that they are not capable of managing. The good news is that exercising patience does pay off. We need to outlast our children for their sake. Once they learn we are serious and determined, they will eventually accept the changes that we are making. Then parents can move on to the next battle. Keep in mind that children want their way in order to have control and avoid painful consequences for their behavior. Because of this, children are quick to tune in how to manipulate parents. Therefore, even when a parent tries to change things for the better, they usually run into resistance. As adults and parents, we need to remind ourselves that children frequently don't know what is best for them. They want to do what they want to do because they believe it will be fun, feel good, or avoid something that they don't want. Children want to do what will avoid inconvenience or cause discomfort for them. These are the factors that motivate childish choices. On the other hand, who are parents? Parents are people who have a tremendous amount of life experience. Their wisdom should go far beyond that of a child. Parents have learned from their experiences what creates hurt and disappointment. Therefore, parents need to take an active role to determine what is best for their children, in spite of what their children want. Parents have a duty to share what they have learned and to help their children avoid some of life's pain. As parents, we should regularly remind ourselves of our considerable life experience and maturity. These are two things that a child does not have. Our duty is to use our knowledge and at times protect them from themselves. Children left on their own are likely to wander into the streets of life only to get run over. Please don't think that children intuitively know what they should or shouldn't do. They certainly don't know what will keep them safe. Children do not know what is best. That is why they need active parents. That is also why we must use discipline to educate them in the right way. Parents are left with the need to make some grown-up choices.